Today's story is written and illustrated by a local author whose name is Hurley. It's called The Imagining Field. And this is done with collage. And remember, we talked about that earlier, which is paper pasted on paper. And with that whole process, you get the whole picture. There was a time when stories had no tellers. My grandpa was just a little boy then, and he remembers when a man kept every story hidden in a small clearing surrounded by forest. The man was called the guard, and he ordered children to be keepers of the stories, standing watch so that no one touched them. The children did not know who would try to steal the stories. Thieves? Or tigers, they imagined? Though what a tiger would do with a story, they didn't know. They simply stood in a circle, their backs to the stories, looking out into the black forest around them. The children wanted to tell stories. They couldn't help it. Stories came as easily to them as laughter. Stories about their dogs and brothers, and stories they invented to make their friends smile. But none of that was allowed. No stories allowed. My grandpa told me about a time when he dreamed up a story for his friend to keep her from falling asleep on watch. The guard snatched his story from the air and trapped it in a jar, taking it to be locked up with the rest. Some stories were kept as words and some as sounds, but many were kept as creatures and inventions. The children caught glimpses of stories from far off between trees, flickers of light and bursts of color, corners of foxes and wings of planes. The children were desperate to experience the stories, to live in them and share them and add their own. So they set out to free the stories. The children first tried trapping the guard by digging a hole for him in the dirt and the leaves. But the guard was not fooled. Then they tried tricking him by dressing raccoons in their sweaters and boots while they sneaked up to the stories in the dark. But the guard knew better. He was determined to keep the stories hidden. Finally, when the children ran out of tricks and traps, my grandpa asked the guard why he kept the stories. The guard had never been asked this. He had never had someone to listen to his story. Stories can be scary and leave us in places we never planned to be, the guard told the children. He had lived through some terribly dark stories and did not understand how stories could be good too, how the surprising new places they lead can be wonderful. It says danger. The guard did not know that stories can fill you up and cheer you, heal whatever hurts, and make paths where you need them. This says, welcome. Will you let us show you? The children asked. The guard was scared, but he nodded his head yes. At the guard's answer, everything changed. Jars unbottled themselves. Trunks sprang open on their hinges. Stories stood up out of books and leapt freely from the children's mouths. Every creature and object came untied until stories galloped and sang and flew through the fields like the dizzying dreams of a child after a carnival. The guard looked around in awe of the forest filling with so many bright, good things. In all the incredible noise and movement, my grandpa caught sight of a girl standing below crackling gold fireworks. Before long, every story found a child to call its own. Children left with stories tucked under their arms and folded in their sweaters, excited to share what they had seen and heard with everyone they loved. On that day, the story keepers became storytellers. That hidden spot in the forest has been called the imagining field ever since. In this place, any creature or adventure one can imagine becomes real. Great humpback whales swim overhead through the fog, and train whistles pipe through the tall grass. Sometimes I visit the field with my grandpa. He tells me many stories on our hike through the forest, but his favorite he saves for when we reach the field. We sit on a log surrounded by stars, and he tells me again about the day the stories were freed and he became friends with the guard's daughter. After years of adventuring together, my grandpa and the guard's daughter fell in love and built a house of stories on the mountain behind the forest. They started our family and filled that house with the wildest, happiest stories they could dream up. Now those stories belong to me and to everyone who hears them. I add them to my own stories, collecting them all like berries in a bucket to share with anyone who is hungry for them. And that is the end of the imagining field. So imaginations can take us anywhere and help us to have all kinds of stories that are our own. Good luck with new stories and new ways of telling them. Bye.